This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It's taken us to a different part of Western Africa this morning. It's going to share a proverb with you, and we'd love to get your interpretation. This one, I'm really interested as to what Barrack is going to say.
Skip that one.
No.
Skip?
Yeah.
No, I can't wait to hear interpretation.
Okay, bring
They're
it on.
always spot on.
Bring it on.
But before I even get to the proverb,
Yes.
I've always wondered, and I really wanted to ask you this, because this country I'm talking about has a coat of arms, and like many coat of arms around the world, this particular one, like many, has a shield charged with a lion. And I've always wondered, why do we have lions on coat of arms? Many countries have adopted that. Many coat of arms have lions.
The lion, I think, virtually everywhere is understood to be the king of the jungle, and political space within which coats of arms operate is a jungle of sorts, and it's a jungle that has gradually evolved into managed space, and that managed space has got to be protected, and it is protected by the king of the jungle for the greater interest of the animals within that jungle. And if you want to get it a lot more clearly, you need to read the state of nature philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and others who say that basically we are born free and we are born in a jungle, but within that jungle where everyone exercises their rights, independence, and freedoms on their own, life becomes nasty, short, and brutish because we are each for ourselves, and the competition that arises in the jungle, therefore, is one that is injurious to our common welfare, and therefore we agree to come together under the shield. We shield each other from one another, and ultimately it's the lion, the king of the jungle, otherwise known as the Leviathan, otherwise known as the law, that then becomes the ultimate protector of life, property in the jungle.
Wow.
And I've not even touched the proverb.
There you go. Just still on the coat of arms.
I was just waiting to hear. That feels like a whole summary of a thesis, you know? So let me go straight to the proverb. The proverb is coming from the Republic of Senegal.
Yes.
Slowly, slowly, you catch the monkey in the forest. It's interesting. We refer to the lion, king of the jungle, in the coat of arms. And now the proverb is slowly, slowly, you catch the monkey in the forest.
You see, in the forest, the monkey is in his element, and he's very difficult to catch because it's sometimes almost impossible to tell whether he is on farmer terra, or that is on land, or he's in the air, he's on the trees. If you try to deal with him on the ground, you can't run after him. He will jump into the trees, into the forest, and for you to reach there is difficult. He even shifts from one tree to the next, right up there. Yourself, if you are on that tree, you would have to come down first to then attempt to go to
climb another tree.
the other tree. So you have to be very wise. You need a lot of wisdom to deal with challenging situations, especially where others within that environment may be endowed with more assets than you have, assets of managing life in the jungle. But slowly, slowly, you can also subdue them. That would be my shot in the dark.
Or maybe in the light. My goodness. A great one, definitely. And, we were just having a conversation before as we began this morning, and we said that over the last many weeks that there's always something going on. There's something that will be to the chagrin of the nation, and we will be like, our eyes popped out of our heads a little bit further than they did last time when this happened. But having said that in the background, in the back end, that the business of nation progression and development is still meant to be happening, and that there are many things that should be happening behind that. So even with the calls for the end to police brutality, even the calls for the hoping that things get better on that front, there's still brick and mortar issues happening when it comes to the state of the nation. And so even as we ask those questions, that's what forms the conversation that we're having with you this morning, when we then look at, in another 1.5 years, in another 2 years, the first term and his term as president will come to an end. And then one must ask, what is it that we feel he should be marked on, or that the administration should be marked on? I'm just going to go a little bit further, that yesterday when he was in church in Machakos, he said that people have been accusing him of overpromising. But he said that is the last thing that he's been doing. He has just been telling Kenyans that he's going to do what he said he's going to do for the betterment of the country, and that he will leave this country better than he found it. So, as we are now in 2025, coming to almost 3 years of Ruto administration, what are your thoughts in terms of how he has led this country and held things down?
Thank you very much once again, Nandu and Dennis. This morning, you will allow me to speak ex cathedra. You will allow me to speak as an authority in political science, because many times we come here and not just in this studio, elsewhere, you christen us as political analysts, and anyone can be a political analyst. I want to speak as a doctor of philosophy in political science, and I hope the country is listening. First, when we talk about the nation, we talk about people. The nation is not a geopolitical space. The nation are human beings. And when we talk about building the nation, we are talking about where we are placing and living human beings, first by giving them a certain sense of nationhood, a sense of belonging, the spirit de corps, as they would say in French, that you are proud to belong, that you feel you are part of it, and you feel that King Lion, whom Dennis referred to at the start, is doing the right thing for the nation. And allow me, therefore, to say that I want to borrow from the American Declaration of Independence in 1776 as an anchor, and from the Constitution of Kenya as an anchor. And based on those two, the kind of assessment that we can make of the tenure of President William Ruto this far, and further promissory notes that he continues to make. The American Declaration of Independence, in its preambular pronouncements, states that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are made equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain basic and fundamental and inalienable rights and freedoms. And among these are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that for these purposes, the institution of government is constituted among men, and that at all times that institution of government shall ensure that the people enjoy their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that whenever any government fails to fulfill its obligation on those premises, then it must be removed and be replaced by another government. That is liberal democracy. You can go back to John Stuart Mill, to Jeremy Bentham, to James Smith, the utilitarians. You can go back to the liberal Democrats that I talked of earlier, the likes of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Montesquieu, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Diderot, Voltaire, and there are many others in between, Thomas Paine. You come up to fairly recent times, and the alphabet does not change. Therefore, the starting point is the human being. Where are you placing and where are you leaving the human being? When we talk about development, even today, within the United Nations entity, where there's a lot of focus on development, we've had earlier on MDGs. We have got other goals that are defined as periodized indicators of the human situation. They talk about sustainable human development. And therefore, within that framework, life is number one. The utilitarians, Jeremy Bentham, James Smith, and John Stuart Smith and others, they make a distinction between life as property and estates as property. And life is preeminent because without the property that is called life, you cannot have any other property. And so you must develop the human being and you must protect life. Now, my assessment of the Kenya Kwanza government's performance in all other spheres, and which are spheres in which, unfortunately, it has failed abysmally, must nonetheless start with how it relates to life. And we are witnessing wanton destruction of life in Kenyan villages, in Kenyan towns and streets, and we are witnessing a government that is gleeful about that destruction of life. It is unapologetic, decidedly unapologetic, that ministers will come out and say, shoot to kill. That members of parliament will come out and say, shoot and kill. As a linguist, I take very, very, very informed note that when the MP for Belgut comes out and says, shoot and kill, he's saying shoot. And while that fellow is fallen, even if he or she is not dead, follow and kill. Shoot and kill. So we must begin there where the president says the police are trained to deal with criminals, not in parenting. And if you surrender your children to the police, you know what to expect. So it's not going to be even that Ruto has built a road, which he hasn't, that Ruto has taken care of health care, which he hasn't. It's not going to be that he has delivered on education, which he has not, or that he has brought down the cost of living, which he hasn't. It's going to be the question of life, the question of his kind of rule. We remember Julius Caesar, who was a Roman dictator between the year 49 BC and 44 BC, and who is credited by having done a lot of things to modernize Rome in his time. But we remember him mostly not for the modernization that he did. We remember him for the tyranny that he exercised on Rome, that he was a dictator, and he was so titled, the dictator, the tyrant, the despot. And so when I look at the space in which President William Ruto operates, I regret to observe that the country is sinking into dictatorship. If people are afraid of making this pronouncement, let me be the one to make that pronouncement, that we are steadily sinking into political autocracy, dictatorship, and that if President Ruto will not have a quiet moment with his soul, to have dialogue with himself, because I hear they are saying they want dialogue, and that dialogue you must begin by dialoguing with your soul. If President William Ruto will not have a dialogue, an honest one, with his soul, I want to believe that there's still a soul left there.
What would you see today? Because even as we talk about some of these things that then were present historically, but then came out to form a lot of the ideologies that we study in education spaces today towards government, they were real. They were done, and they were studied, and then it was documented about them. What is happening in Kenya today? Give me 3 that you would say this points to the beginnings of a dictatorship, autocracy, authoritarianism, totalitarianism.
The first thing is, and thank you for that, the first thing I would point out is the tendency by an individual to believe that he knows everything, that there can be no different shade of even the same opinion, that he is always right. When you get to a point where you know everything and everybody else is wrong, and that which you know, which is always right, must be done, then you are beginning to become a dictator. In George Orwell, we read Animal Farm, and we see the animals that say Comrade Napoleon is always right. So you have this sheeple. In social science, we call them sheeple because we borrow from sheep, and we know about the sheep in Animal Farm, the ones who say a Comrade Napoleon is always right. You develop a community of worshippers and praise singers who cannot even allow alternative opinion to be ventilated. They're saying you are always right. And they shout loudest. They interrupt other people and other voices as they also attempt to ventilate. The third thing, and I'll give you slightly more than 3, you asked for 3.
Okay.
The third one is that you then begin mobilizing the instruments of state against alternative voices. You are silencing dissent. First, it was not dissent, it was alternative opinion, but you silence it, not now by using sheeple, but by using the armed and legalistic instruments of the state. You can look at our context here. President William Ruto knows everything. He even says, I have a PhD. And I say this notwithstanding the fact that I have said I want to speak ex cathedra as an authority in that space. But I limit myself only to that narrow space of being a doctor of philosophy in political science. It's my space. I can ventilate. President William Ruto is omniscient. He seems to know everything. But that omniscience boils down to pansophism, where pansophism is a shallow grasp or claim of knowledge in about everything. So he knows everything. Those are the origins of dictatorship. He has sheeple, and you can hear the sheeple saying, even from Wajir, that we are going to staff the boxes. You can hear the sheeple in the so-called empowerment forums being made to dance by a lead sheeple that says, come and dance. You can see the sheeple displaying women in their bodies and telling them to turn around. And the feminine sheeple turns around, and you hear stuff to the effect that this one here, if perchance you are to hold Congress with them, the next morning you would wake up, I don't know. Then you are also seeing the DCI, which has been instrumentalized. It has been weaponized. You can see the kind of things that it's doing. You can see the ESCC, and I wonder what the Bishop David Oginde, I don't know whether he's still there or not. I presume he's there. I wonder what he thinks and whether he sits well with his conscience as the entity that as an ordained bishop of God, of Jesus Christ, presides over persecution. And I would even dare ask him, Bishop Oginde, is it not enough that Christ was persecuted and crucified? Must we be persecuted and crucified by this entity that you preside over? It has lost its raison d'etre completely. We are gravitating towards autocracy.
Barrack, I just want to circle back to what you've described this person to be. He needs to have a dialogue with himself, with his soul. And the kind of person you are describing who maybe listens to himself, is not listening to anybody else, seems to me like a man who's in control of himself. He knows what he wants, when he wants it, and how he wants it. But how then would you describe his leadership style in this context? So last week we had a group of Mount Kenya politicians meeting somewhere. And what they were then saying is sounding the alarm over the backers of Mount Kenya. And I'll just give a quote from one of them who was saying that we are working hard to ensure Mount Kenya does not abandon this government. But some of our people must tame their mouths. You cannot build a president with hate speech and threats of vote rigging or even violence. So we've had this discussion where you have different communication or spokespersons for government saying different things. People are reading from different scripts. You now go down to now the loyalists who are supporting him from whatever region. And you've quoted the calls for vote staffing and those conversations. Are we then saying this man who appears to be in control, and he says he's in control, and like Ndu said, he wants to finish his term, and like he said, he's going to finish all the projects and everything he promised. But then you look at everybody else around him and what everyone else is saying around him. What does this speak of? Is it somebody who's lost control, or is in control?
A conversation with oneself is critical for all great leaders. Jesus Christ used to retreat from society to hold conversations with him. Before he even began his ministry, for those of us of the Christian faith, we are familiar with the fact that he retreated for 40 days and nights in the wilderness to hold a conversation with himself. That the Prophet Muhammad retreated for 40 days to hold a conversation with himself, a conversation with his soul. That within Christendom, there is always that moment when you must retreat, go into some kind of pilgrimage and hold a conversation with yourself. And ask yourself some very honest questions. You meditate, you reflect, you come back with a certain sense of renewal. The whole notion of fasting is founded around that. But we also are aware, as you talk about the people from the mountain who are saying we will come together, that there is the Stockholm Syndrome, as it is called. The Stockholm Syndrome, where the victim wants to apologize for the villain. Remember in Stockholm, in Sweden, some years back, there are some teachers who are taken hostage by hostage takers, but in the end, they ended up as the apologists for the hostage takers. A government can take you hostage, and depending on the levels of intellectual sophistication or lack of it, you even start feeling that you should be endeared towards them, or they're endeared towards you. The story has been told, perhaps apocryphally so, of Joseph Stalin. Some say it was Adolf Hitler, others say it was Joseph Stalin who unplucked the feathers of a chicken.
Yeah.
And when he let the chicken free and started looking like it was walking away, it didn't walk away, it stood there, and he started throwing some corn towards it, and the chicken walked towards him. The Stockholm Syndrome would be there. And all these are markers of a dictatorship. I have said, and I reiterate, that I do hope that there is a soul left to hold a conversation with.
Who would have that conversation? And I think that's the question. Who would have the conversation with him? Should there be a soul left? Who would have the conversation with him? There have been many calls for it.
The conversation must begin with him. You cannot come out and hold a conversation with us if you have not held a conversation with yourself. Because when you look at even the dialogue that Mr. Odinga is calling for, I do not understand what dialogue it is, because we have had many dialogues in this country before. We have got the TJRC report, which is a factor of a national dialogue that consumed a lot of money in Kenya shillings and in dollars. We have had a dialogue that has given us the Constitution of Kenya 2010. It is in effect a compendium of our thoughts, our reflections as Kenyans about how we should govern ourselves. We have had a dialogue that eventually percolated into the Akiumi report, into the Kennedy Kiliku report, into many other reports. We do not have a paucity of reports if we want to move forward. But I'm aware that Mr. Odinga is looking for an opportunity for an expanded executive in which he formalizes the space that he occupies today in the Kenya Kwanza government, which is the space of Prime Minister, and which Kenyans should reject. And
that will have to go into a referendum.
Perchance, if that goes into a referendum, Kenyans must sensitize themselves to reject that, because it is completely unconscionable that each time there is a crisis, some individuals, and their specific individuals, will always exploit it for purposes of their own social, economic, and political upward mobility. So, in summary, Ndu, you must hold a conversation with yourself, and conversations with the individual souls should be held every day. Before you go to sleep, hold a conversation with yourself and review your day and place yourself before God. In the morning, before you leave your bed, hold a conversation with yourself and hold conversations with those around you in the house. Then you can come out and hold conversations.
With
So
everybody
Ndu, this space which I get to and you come in, where I'm saying I do hope there is a soul left. It is something very critical that must be emphasized, because when you come up and you tell us that the police are not trained in parenting, the police are parents. The police leave home their children, and the police must reflect about that which they do to other people's children and wonder whether they should be done to their children. They are parents before they become the police. And President William Ruto is a parent before he becomes the President of the Republic of Kenya. He's probably telling us that he has been a better parent than we have been. But we would ask him, what happens when we see a child who owns a fleet of matatus that are driving recklessly on our roads and people are killing others and human beings are being thrown out of those matatus? What should we say about the parent behind that kind of individual?
So why say it, Barrack? And because obviously here when we have this, we're looking at a lot of these things. Then of course you have to then study the psyche and the mind of a human being, and many have done that for leaders, and to be able to see where this comes from. If that is very obvious to people who say, well, the police are parents, if that is very obvious, where you say, but his son is, owns a fleet of matatus, where does all of this come from? This is something that is very clear to everybody who's asking the question. So why then would he say it? Why would he say, pay attention to your children, and children pay attention to the counsel of your parents, knowing full well that that's not the issue at hand?
It is, in my view, now that notion of sense of entitlement, that you feel you are different. The laws apply to the other people, they do not apply to you. You do what I say, you don't do what I do. That power, as Lord Acton has famously said, corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That when you are doing the rounds and the hustings, when you're moving from pillar to post and from post to pillar, begging for our votes, you are a very different and humble individual. And once we give you the commander-in-chief's sword, once we place you in the seat of power, once we take you to State House, you forget where you have come from. You forget that you are the individual who was kneeling down and crying, shedding tears, bending your shaven head, moving your mouth, crying, that you are now a new individual, a new human being. You now speak to us, at us, with draconian authority, forgetting that it's just for a time. I wrote yesterday in the Sunday Standard about the dictators who have occupied that space, from the BCs to the post-BCs, to the new age. And they are always there just for a period of time. So there's loss of the philosophy of government, in short.
So, Barrack, is there room for redemption? So, if he has a conversation with himself, and obviously he's going to seek re-election, as it is right now, government is still moving on. He's still launching projects. He's still working, despite all these other things going on. And your earlier statement when you started, you said a nation is human beings. So if he comes to a point where now he has a Damascus moment and he realizes, I'm a sinner and what I've done is wrong, what I've said is wrong, I repent. Is there room for redemption? Who's going to be the person forgiving him if he seeks that forgiveness? Is it a little too late?
You know, George Bernard Shaw has framed a very interesting case for reflection on redemption, on repentance. If we may use the case of the Grand Inquisition in Europe in the Middle Ages, the repentant sinner, the repentant heretic, the repentant witch, for example, would be told that it is very good that you have repented, but having repented, just so that you do not fall into temptation again and repeat that which you did, we must protect you by keeping you away from that kind of space permanently. And as a reminder that you could slide into that space again, we must keep you in isolation. We have removed you from the path to eternal perdition. Your soul shall not perish in the furnaces of hell, but we protect you and pack you away in isolated prison where you shall, for the rest of your life, eat the bread of sorrow and drink the waters of affliction. You will not be allowed to come back to State House. So if President William Ruto were to be truly repentant, his remaining duty would be to steer the troubled ship of state to a safe harbor and say that I destabilized this ship of state for a while, but I saw the light on my road to Damascus.
How would he do that?
And I brought it to a safe harbor. And I now retire from that space. I go away, and I do hope that those who will captain this ship of state shall never repeat the mistakes that I made.
So how would he do that, Barrack? And again, into the situations in which Kenya finds itself today, what would be the markers for you to say, well, okay, we can retrace, retrack on certain things and say, okay, well, I've cleaned this up, then we may move forward. What would you see? What would speak to the minds of Kenyans to say, okay, yes, we're on a good track now?
Restoration of constitutionalism and the rule of law. Formalize his government with Raila Amolo Odinga. It's one of the highest public indicators of impunity in government, that although the Constitution states clearly that anyone who forms government in a manner other than as stated in this Constitution breaks the law, they have still gone on to form that government. And we read in today's press that Mr. Odinga is saying he's with Ruto until 2027.
Yes.
Under what is patently an unlawful formation of government. Get rid of that. Allow us to ventilate and to demonstrate, to organize and to mobilize and to picket without sending goons. He must come up and own up and say that we failed the country. We brought goons in the streets. In spite of having legally constituted police service, we still brought goons in the streets, and we sent the Kenya police to escort them and protect them. Apologize to the country for the killing, for the loss of life in the street, under the watch of this government, and many of us believe
and that's enough. Sorry, Barrack, and that's enough. That there was loss of life in the streets by people whom you swore to protect. Is that enough to say stop it all? That's enough. Forget about anything else that people cry about.
It's the starting point. And I have seen that every so often, if it's not the president, it will be one of his acolytes coming out and talking about destruction of property, destruction of the economy, and which is truly regrettable, because nobody wants property to be destroyed, stalling of business. But not a word is uttered about the people who are killed. What about a child who gets killed when they are in their mother's living room? That they surrender to a police bullet. If it is too much, asking the president too much to come and express remorse over people who have been killed in the streets, can't he at least empathize with the ones who died at home?
Wouldn't that then be an admission that we did something wrong, or something wrong happened? And as it's the case at the moment, it doesn't appear there's an admission that there is anything else going wrong. As a matter of fact, it's the police officers who are receiving all the accolades. You're doing a brilliant job. We are supporting you. You're keeping the peace. You're protecting property and all that.
As I said at the outset, the first property that must be protected is life. And that's not just Barrack speaking. It is documented and very cogently argued in liberal philosophy, the philosophy of liberal democracy, that you have got life that is corporeal, property that is corporeal, and there's property that is disembodied. That property must begin with the life which God and nature has given us. So before you even move to property as physical estates, the president must be able to regret the loss of the property that is called life, that we cannot create, that is given to us by God and nature. Then he can move to the other property. And remember that we are talking about the possibility of penitence and redemption. And it must begin with confession, with admission, that if we have not been able to admit that we have destroyed life, that we are not able to be remorseful, to regret, even when a stranger has died, and about the circumstances of dying that we do not know anything about. There is a universal human principle against loss of life. And if you are not able to be touched, then you are dead. You are dead. There's nothing inside you. We are talking about individuals who are dead and who are the agents of death.
If you are the president today, with all that has happened, because, like I said, the schedules are on course. Everything is going on as planned. He has said, I didn't overpromise. I just raised Kenya's ambitions. And he says, I intend to keep every promise I made within my term. Will it be business as usual? What would you do? Would you go launch projects? Will you continue with your work, looking at your diary and who you need to meet, where? What do you do with the time that you're left with?
I would go back to my office to work. I would go back to my office to reflect, to seek wise counsel, and to implement things. I would go back into my office to wonder where the rain began beating us and to correct things. Because there's a sense indeed in which if we were to give Dr. William Ruto some degree of benefit of doubt, if we were to cut him a slack, we would say that it is a cumulative miasma that has overtaken us over a number of decades, and that he is the current custodian. And there's a place, therefore, where the rain started beating us. Andu and Dennis Okari. God has been kind to me. I've been in this country for a while, and therefore I've got the institutional memory. That when we talk about things like SHA, healthcare, that there was a time in this country when we went to hospital and we got treatment 100% free, without putting down a coin, without belonging to NHIF, without belonging to SHA. In Nairobi, here in Ofafa, Jericho, where I went to primary school, we would go to the dispensary in Lumumba and we would be treated for free.
And it worked.
And it worked. That we would go to the dispensary in Bahati and it worked. And if it was something that needed to be graduated to a higher level, we would go to Rhodes Avenue Hospital. There's a hospital behind the Kenya Polytechnic in Nairobi, and we would be treated. And you would go to the clinic in Westlands, you would go to the dispensary in Casino, and you would be treated. And you went to the Nyanza Provincial Hospital, to the Kisumu District Hospital, to the Kisii, and you were treated 100% free. You didn't put down a coin. What happened? Where did the rain begin beating us? That here in the city of Nairobi, as I grew up, as I went to school, we had a city council that took away the garbage without us paying for it, that brought dustbins, that painted our houses and homes in Eastlands from Kariako to Ziwani, through California, to Jerusalem, Jericho, to Uhuru Estate, without us paying a coin, that they fumigated those houses. There was
Spice up.
That did the cleaning of the lawns. What happened?
A good place to end with that question in terms of what happened, and perhaps one who can bring back such a time is what Kenya is looking for. Dr. Barrack Muluka, thank you for joining us this morning. Ex-cathedra is what you said you were being today. You lived up to that. Asante sana. At 9 a.m. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
This month on Startup.